Hey guys, and welcome to Pheas Airsoft, where today I'm going to do a disassembly for repair and maintenance on this JING GONG JG069 or MP5 SWAT. Hey guys, and welcome back. If you do enjoy this content today, please do consider liking, commenting, subscribing, because those interactions help me get seen by the YouTube algorithms, and that helps the channel to grow. If you want to support the channel a little bit more, the Linktree link down below will take you to all of my socials, including my Discord, and the join button also down below will take you to channel memberships, which is 99p a month, totally optional, really appreciated. Gets you custom videos, giveaways, your own sort of chat section on my Discord and things like that. So we'll get started then. Hopefully you've seen the unboxing. If not, it is linked down below. So this is the JG polymer, pretty much all polymer MP5, which I quite liked and enjoyed. So the first thing we'll focus on is getting the gearbox out, basically. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this body pin at the back here. So we need a flat head. So I'm just going to put my finger on the underside of it, because this will just drop out if not. That's one. Push that out. Now there's a few body pins and they can be different sizes, so I need to make sure that I keep them sort of organized in a way that I can I'm aware of them. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to pull on this whole assembly. Now it's going to come so far and then it's going to stop a little bit, and I've just wiggled just to lift it up off this bit here. So I've got that out of the way. Now what we've got here is a little plastic clip, and we've got a little metal sort of almost L-shaped spring as well that sit underneath it. Now I'll discuss the orientation of those when we're putting it back together towards the end of the video. So I'll put those together so I know those are all there. Now looking in there, the wiring does come over the top. That is a quick change spring system, but I can't access it because the wiring's in the way. Awesome. So we're gonna have to get grips to this. So next thing then, I was hoping, a bit like a G3, I could just slide it out the back, but not to be. So I've pushed the pin out, I've removed the handguard, put that to one side. We are going to have to basically remove the front end to get rid of this, to split the body and so on and so forth. So next thing we'll do is we'll get to removing this part. So I'm gonna need a Phillips head. That should do. Now I've got my thumb largely over the top of that, because when I start releasing the second screw particularly, this is going to ping, or try to, because the motor is under compression. That's one. Using wrong type of Phillips head, which is why it's not biting properly. If you are not using entirely the correct shape, what you can do is start to round the edges off, and that's where you can start getting issues. So I'm just going to lift that up. Now that has got a big adjustment screw, even that's a polymer, but there is still a plate underneath as well. So keep hold of that little plate which sat just on top of the motor there. So I'm just going to pop the wire in. So the red was at the front, the black was at the back. I'm going to lift the motor out. There's our stock JG motor, and the red and the black wires came in exactly where so the black came up at the back and stayed at the back, and the red came in at the front and stayed at the front. So I'm just going to remove those two screws in there as well. Now there are only two screw holes for it, and in this one they are the bottom right and the top left, like an Airsoft AR would be. That's loosened off. Now where this is going to start getting tricky in a second is going to have to remove the selectors, I believe. Oh, let's see if it's one of the newer types actually. No, it won't be, because of the ambidextrous. So next thing I'm going to do is we're going to get a tiny little grub screw in there, bit in there. Let's see if I've got one. It's that tiny. Nope. T6, is T6 going to do it for us? Winner's the day. Oh, it is, I think. Yeah, so T6. So I've used a Torx 6 or T6 to just grab into that little set screw, grub screw in there. So I'm just going to put that to one side. That should now allow me to pull the select. So just push lightly. So there's the select to come through from the other side. So I'm just going to put that down. And then next I should be able to remove this front body pin, and then this assembly should come away quite nicely. So again, I'm just going to undo that with a flat head. That's out of the way. Now that is, it looks like it's almost an identical length to the rear one, but I'm still going to keep them separate just in case. So I'm just going to wiggle this up. Now there is a little cam just like in a sort of a G3 type there, and I'm going to be careful not to rag the wire in, feed those up. There goes the little cam. We'll look at that later. And I'm just going to manipulate using my fingers. I'm just going to get the wiring to pop out. I don't want to damage the wiring, obviously. And that's one. That's one of the screws come out. So one of the screws has come out from in there, which is fine. I've kept hold of it. There's our little cam. Oops, daisy. We'll sort that shortly. Now, that's quite an improvement for JG. We have got metal bushings. They're quite big, chunky bushings as well. I still can't get the gearbox out because it's still encased in here and the back isn't open enough to allow it to come out. So next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to remove the front end so that we can then basically pry open the body. Before I do that, I'm going to remove the front side because this helps clamp it down. So I'm just going to remove via this screw here. I'm just going to undo that. So that's removed. Get rid of that out of the way. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this screw here, and the hop arm as well. So I'm going to have to pry this little C-clip out. So I'm just going to put my finger under this screw here to catch this, the little nut coming off the back, the bolt coming off the back nut. Confusing my words today. There we go. There's that little nut. I'm going to put that there for now. I'm going to remove, and there comes the little screw with it. Put those together. Next, I'm going to remove this screw here. Put that with that. Those are two different screws. So that's got quite big, thick, chunky threads because it's biting into plastic. That one's got much finer threads because it's going into the little nut that comes with it. Now what I'm going to do is very carefully and delicately just get something to nip into the edge of that C-clip. And try not to lose it. There we go. So there's the C-clip. Just pried that off and just basically got the end of the T6 into one of the little gaps. That now should, he says, famous last words, should just push through. So I just had to put a little bit of pressure on it just to pop it, and there it is. It's popped through. Now traditionally it used to be that there'd be a little O-ring on there, a little tiny rubber O-ring. Obviously they've done away with that because those O-rings disappeared. Now at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to unclip the fuse cover. So I'm going to pop that clip there. And there's another little clip there. That just takes it away from the outer. And I should, there we go, just be able to separate this assembly. There we go. And take that out of the way. I'm going to pull that spring out for now so I don't lose it. And now we're getting down into the last parts to get into the body. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this little screw in here that keeps the mag release together. Now that's quite a tiny little screw. I'm going to put that on its own over there, and when I do that now I can put my finger into the mag well and I can pull that button out. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this screw here and this screw here. one screw, that's quite a little screw. And there's the other one. Now, the not very nice feeling part of all of this is I start basically just prying it open across the whole body, and it's going to feel a bit weird, and it's going to be a little bit creaky, and that's just my knees. Just check that that's fully out. Yeah, that's not biting anything. There are some little basically metal pins. I'm just going to slide it off camera slightly just so I've got a bit of better angling on it. Now at this point what I'm going to do, is because this one's mine and it doesn't matter, I'm just going to put a screwdriver in a few places like that. I'm just going to pry, because there's basically metal bars that it slides on and connects to there. Look, I got it then. I'm going to bring it around here and do the same. There we go. So, I'm just going to pop that up and off. I'm going to flip that over. And we can now get our hop unit. We've got our gearbox. Our hop unit's screwed down. So our hop unit's got a screw there and a screw there. So I'm just going to lift those out. And then we can lift this all out. Now, first things, initial things, that is not necessarily a bad thing that it's a plastic hop unit. I don't recall ever seeing a white one like that before. But that is our hop unit. Let's have a look. So pulling it out takes the hop off, pushing it all the way in. Or does it? Oh no, pulling it out. So pulling the lever that way, which obviously if you're twisting the lever, pushing the lever that way, it will bring it back out that way. That is the hop fully on. Now it barely took anything to be lifting 2.5, so there's a substantial amount of adjustment in there. The barrel's a little bit mucky at this beginning part, but it looks like it's cleaner a lot further down. And then we've got our gearbox where the wiring comes in and round the top there. It does look like they've taped it to the gearbox as well. Lift that out. There is a screw there, which I will reseat shortly, which goes down there. That out of the way for now. We'll sort that in a minute. So we've got our gearbox then, so we've got wiring coming in the back. That is a quick change spring. So for this I'm just going to use my massive flathead and we're just going to push in. Wow, that's stiff. I suspect because the gearbox is partially compressed back, we are out of luck there a little bit. Let's see if I can release it. No, we'll just have to make do. So the wiring has been taped on the gearbox just to help shape where it's going to go. So I'm just going to gently lift that up, gently lift that. I'm just going to release the wiring from there for now. And then what we're going to do is we've got some Torx. I'm thinking the Torx 10 screws around there. Now we have got the sort of reinforcement around here because they're quite prone to breaking traditionally around this area. So let me just get my Torx 10. It is Torx 10, at least across the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws around the base of the bottom of the gearbox shell. So make sure you've been keeping your screws in logical places and areas to group together so you know where everything's come from. So all these screws around the bottom are all identical. We've got a black plastic nozzle, not necessarily a bad thing. And lately JG, like the compression in the cylinder and everything have been like nothing short of amazing. So that's all out there now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the old school method. So I'm just going to take a thin screwdriver, I'm going to push that into there just to help keep all the spring guide while I pop the gearbox. There's the thing popping back. So there is our quick change spring with a linear spring on it on this occasion. Now typically I would expect these to come out of the box at around 400 FPS. From the factory. Obviously this is in the UK, so it's been made UK legal by the retailer. So this one is doing about 330 FPS with no hop unit on it, with no hop set. We have got what is basically an AR style trigger block in there. A attempt has been made at shimming. You know, there are shims in there and things, which is always nice to see. Just going to lift, in fact, I'll lift the compression assembly first. So we're going to lift the compression assembly out. So we've got our MP5 length nozzle, we've got a plastic cylinder head, we've got our plastic piston. It's not the greatest, but you know, it is what it is. Let's have a look at compression then. So what I'm looking for is in this vented cylinder is I shouldn't get far past this vent with my finger over there, and I should lock it up basically with air compression. So ooh, yeah. Yes, excellent compression. We'll try the same thing again with the air nozzle. Now I expect that there will be air leaking here. There is, but really not a lot. That's taking some real force. So that took a lot of force to get that out then. The compression there, again, considering the price point and everything, that is pretty impressive out of the box. Compression. Just going to carefully mess with this because this is annoying already. Now you should, if your wiring does jump out, you can see generally that there are obvious points where it should roughly sit and go. Now I've jumped that off of there. I'm going to lift this gear out. Look, you know, it did sound a little bit scratchy, so I suspect that the motor height needs adjusting a little bit, but I'm not seeing any evidence of sort of scratching on each other from the gear set, which is a good thing. Must mean that the gears are at least moderately well shimmed from each other. So what I did there we go, is anti-reversal latch is sat on a spring that's pushing it against this gear to stop the gear set unwinding when you finish shooting. So what I'm going to do is, you can hear it clicking away, I'm going to reset the teeth of that gear out of the way of the piston's teeth, because we don't want to cause issues and a premature lockup when we reassemble. So this now is going to be a bit of a delicateness to try and keep the anti-reversal latch in place, and it's already going. Next thing, we're going to reassemble this. So we've got our tappet plate, which is what is pulled against by this little tab here. That pulls this back to let a BB in. The nozzle comes forward, the piston slams forward, uses the air to fire it. So we're going to hook that spring on there. We're going to put it on this little post here. Tape keeps getting in our way, and we're going to hook it on that little post, and then we're going to stretch it back, and then it should seat fairly nicely. And if you run your finger across there and there where the cylinder sits inside the gearbox, it should be basically flush. You shouldn't be able to feel any real gap, maybe like a very tiny fraction of a millimeter, but it relatively should be flush all the way across. And your piston, you know, there's a track here, your piston should be sat in that track, and the teeth should be squared up against the sector gear there. So it looks like I am still winning against the anti-reversal latch. So I'm going to gently hold it in place. I'm going to lift this side of the gearbox into place. I'm going to drop it in at the front first, No, I've lost. You little sod. Right. Anti-reversal latches are the bane of my existence. Right. So I'm going to bring the upper in, the right hand side of the gearbox. I always call it upper because of the orientation I end up working in. I'm going to drop the front on first, and then I'm going to drop it backwards, and then I'm going to use a screwdriver and a little Torx to manipulate things around a little bit to get them to drop into place. I'm going to go off camera and cry and scream because it's not doing what it should be doing, and the wiring is jumping about. It weren't in place. Okay. Whew. Right, drop that one. Drop that one. There we go. So the wiring's in place. I'm wiggling, that's fine. But luckily now we don't have to fight getting obviously the spring guide in. We can do that in a second. So I'm going to drop these screws back in and I'll be back in a second. So screws are back in. Make sure that the gearbox is all flush all along the seam, the two halves of it. I am throwing stuff all over the place there. Lift that out of the way. So you're making sure it's flush. Make sure that the screws should go in easily until the point at which they sort of bite down for that final bit of tightness. If at any point you're finding you're fighting it in all the way, then it's not in the right threads and you're damaging it. So spring then is just going to go in, wiggle it about. It should go in most of the way. We're just going to push that in and quarter turn. There we go. So it was a push in, quarter turn so that the bar comes across. It was a little bit stiff just to get it in. It obviously must be tolerances are not always amazing in sort of the stuff made in China, but the bar should be, that screw should be flush across the back with the bar horizontal. Then what I can do is I can bring these wires back in and I can tape them back down now. There. So those are taped down now, so I'm happy with that. So what we can do is we can start to reassemble everything now. And this is not going to be mega easy, unfortunately. It's not the easiest sort of one. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sit my hop unit onto the air nozzle like that, and we're going to sit that down whilst feeding the wiring underneath into that position. There. Now what I'm checking for is that the wires are not getting bitten anywhere. They should be relatively free moving, because if they're not in the right position, they're going to get crimped and they're going to stop things seating together properly. I've brought the wiring round underneath like it should do. I'm just going to, there we go, just seating that, and then the hop unit is just wiggling free a little bit. Now at the moment that seems to be away from where it should be. No, there we go. Right, so now I'm going to screw the hop unit down. I'm going to bring in its little screws again. Again, these are plastic screws that, intended for biting into plastic. So if they're not going in easily, then you're not in the right threads and you're going to damage or possibly split something. So make sure that you sort of go backwards a little bit before you go forwards, just to click into those threads properly. So now our sort of gearbox is sat a little bit easier. Yeah. just checking that it's lining up down there, that it's referencing as being in the right place. So next thing then, we've got our mag catch. We've obviously got the other half of the button. There's a part of the button there. So we're just going to sit this. We're going to push this button up. I'm going to sit that like that in there. So that just hooks under the button there. And when I pull it, it basically goes against something underneath there, and it basically will put it back into position. So like that. Like that. Okay, so the spring is right there. I'm going to lay that back down now. Now we're going to bring this top section in. Now there is a brass tube and it's a little bit wedged in there. It might be free rolling. The brass tube goes down through that part, and I'm keeping my finger on that silver screw there just while we get this. And what I've done is I'm just going to flip it over, and there's kind of lots of things going off here all at once. So I need to make sure that the silver nut washer doesn't come out of there, whilst also simultaneously making sure that the hop adjuster lever comes out of its appropriate slot, which it appears to be doing, whilst making sure that this also doesn't sag down and ends up plugged in properly, which it's doing there, look, into either side of the gearbox, because there's like a little track with it. Otherwise it drops down and it just looks silly. So everything looks like it's going back together nicely. Now it will be a little bit stiff because obviously you've got pins that you're trying to position and get sort of into pushing into like the appropriate slots and things. That brass bar just needs a little bit of working. There we go. Just positioned it a little bit better, and it should sit more or less flush through there. And what we're looking for is that pretty much it will relatively easily sit more or less flush. Now it doesn't matter massively if it doesn't, because obviously the screws are going to hold it down. What we're not wanting is great big massive gaping holes somewhere, is what we don't want. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to bring the screw in for there. I'm going to bring the screw in for there, and we've got another one that we're going to do shortly in the front there, which is those ones there. That one is that one there. So I'm going to drop that one in. It's one of the short little plastic thread screws. It's not actually plastic, it's got the bigger threads. So I'm just going to screw that into there. Again, don't over tighten because you don't want to obviously damage plastic too much. Just making sure that it's bitten in and it's pulled it together is all we need. I'm going to do this same with this one here. There we go. So we're looking good. We're coming together nicely. At this point, if you want to bring the upper sight, you can do, and that just drops into place. Well, it's loose like this, you can adjust the sight a little bit side to side. There's a little screw on the side that will allow you to do it. Obviously, once this is tightened down, it's you're going to be fighting against that screw a little bit, so it won't be as easy to adjust. Next thing I'm going to do is we're going to put the mag release button on. So I'm just going to drop that through in that gap there. I might need to press the button a little bit just to wiggle them about so that they drop together, and then I'm going to bring in the button and secure that button in from that side. Again, make sure that it's not, if it's difficult to get it in, then you are not in the right place. So that mag catch now, I can see it's operating that button properly on that spring. So we've got a working mag catch. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring in our front assembly. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that that spring goes down that rod in there, and I slide it all the way down. Perfect. Next, we've got a little metal outer shroud on our outer barrel. We've got this clip here that's loose and free but should sit in line with that, and then we've got basically the end of the outer barrel there. So I'm just going to start sliding this on at this end. I'm then going to bring the shroud in as well. whilst also feeding this spring into the charging handle assembly. Now I just need to check. No, I didn't think there was a rod in there necessarily, but I just wanted to check. So I'm just going to position the inner barrel into there, into the outer. Now this point here, what I want to do is, I realised I messed up. Pheas, let's put that. There we go. Because that should sit in line with that, and that should just, it will be a little bit tricky because it's obviously under compression from that spring in the charging handle. That's now working. Happy with that. That is more or less sitting where I want it to do. So the first one I'm going to put back in is the screw and the nut. So I'm just going to drop the bolt and the nut in there. So I'm going to drop the nut in there. Remember, the tiny little thin threads are what we need here. So I'm just going to screw this in. I can feel it's now biting in the nut. Now I've had to screw it in a lot further than before it got to the nut at the end, purely because it's basically a little bit out of position, but it's just making sure it basically pulls the clip into position. So that's nice and secure now. We're not losing that. Whilst I'm still here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to secure the fuse holder in there and there. That's now out of the way, and I can put that little wire under that clip there. So our wiring's now secure. Next one, I can bring this long screw in here, which is going to drop in there, and it's going to bite through to the other side. So this was the much bigger threads, obviously not forgetting that don't over tighten because it's just biting into plastic. You don't want to damage it. Next, we've got our hop adjuster. So hop off is all the way over this way. Why is it hooking in my hoodie? So I've made sure I've hooked it into the adjustment arm there. I'm going to flip that over, and I'm going to just use my finger initially to see if I can get it on. Yep, so just click that onto place. We've now got a hop adjustment, nice and clicky. It's looking good so far. Next thing then, we need the lower. So I'm going to bring the lower back in, and we need our little sort of cam for the selector plate that interfaces with this part here. So what we're going to do is, this is the orientation of this little cam, and it's going to sit in, I can drop it through this side like this. Now hopefully, I don't know how well that can be seen, but basically there is a little lip here. It sits, it'll stop on the lip there, and it'll rotate the other way, and it kind of connects between two lips, so it doesn't go on top of them, and this should be sat all the way through. So what I'm going to do first, and this is going to be tricky, you might need to just reposition this. In fact, you know what, I'm just going to put the wires through first, because that's easier. So I'm just going to feed the wire in, just taking it off. I'll move it further on. Right, that's the black wire in. That's the other screw knocked out. I don't know why I'm overstressing this. So just took that off camera just to feed those two wires in. Now, as I get it into this point, what I can do now is, now I can bring this little cam in. I'm just going to position it in, and I'm going to flip it and let gravity do my hard work from it. Oh, no, it's not. There we go. Now gravity's going to do the hard work. So I've just flipped it over on its side like this, whilst I feed the wires through, and just wiggle the trigger into position. The wiring does not want to play right now. There we go. The black wire was causing me issues. So the cam is still in place. I can flip it over the other way. Just need to wiggle it into position. What's blocking it? It was just, how was it? Oh, it looks like the camera angle's changed. It's because it has changed fighting with this cam. So I've dropped it back in position. The wiring's going back in. I've got it upside down just so I can see what I'm doing and where I'm going with it. There we go. And it just needed, it's all it needed in the end. God, Pheas made it look so difficult. All it needed was just wiggling about a little bit. So I'm just going to, what that is, making sure it's more or less flush at the back there. The hole should more or less line up with the brass pin there. So what I'm going to do, just to make sure that I'm putting things in the right place, I'm going to drop this pin back through. Now there are teeth there by my thumbnail. Those are going to go in these little gaps here. And if it doesn't quite sit flush, pull it back out, twist it around. I can see it's come out the other side, so I know it's ready for that particular screw. Give me a flathead. That's now locked in. Now I can put the screw in there, the selector. So I'm just going to drop that through from this side. Again, we're just looking for, there we go. And there we go. Just needed wiggling about to position it through. So I can see that the notch in it for the grub screw is underneath. We're going to drop this on top. It's all screwed together securely. So I'm just going to drop that on top. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it round to the safe setting so that I can get the T6 down in there in that set screw. Make sure it's nice and tight so you don't lose it. And there is my selector back in position nicely. Next thing I can do is I can bring in those two screws that were inside the pistol grip. Again, there's only appropriate places only left to screw anything in. So that's one. Wow, this is going to be fun. What I've done there is delicately just dropped it down into the hole and then use the end of the screwdriver to basically position it so it goes in where it should go in. Now make sure when you're in here that you can see the wire come straight out of the gearbox and obviously into the pistol grip, because if it's under the plastic of the pistol grip it's going to crunch it, it's going to obviously damage it. So we're just going to pull those out of the way. I'm going to drop our motor in, red to the front, black to the back. Now the motor will, or should, there we go, be springy in its positioning like that. I'm just going to put the black connector on to the black terminal at the back. I'm going to put the red onto the front. There we go. I'm going to bring in the little plate that sits on top there. Obviously careful not to knock it off. And I'm going to drop this in now. It is slightly off towards the back, and I think that's the orientation that we need it to be in when we put the motor on. If it goes on, yeah, it is. It should just, sit nice and flush. You shouldn't have to force anything, as we said before. Make sure that you get on in those threads, because we are screwing into plastic, so you don't want to damage those threads. Come on. That's one. The other one is desperately trying to, the motor spring is desperately trying to fling the motor plate. Come on. There we go. Make sure that's tight. There we go. So we're just slightly recessed into there, which is how it should be. Now we're going to bring in the stock. So I'm going to drop my little spring. There is a longer section to it and a shorter section. The longer section goes down and into that gap. When I bring this in, if you look, there is there's a very short end and there's a longer end. The longer end has got like a rounded off corner. That rounded off corner should be facing up like that. Hopefully you can tell and see that. Then we're just going to bring this in and we're just going to slide that straight on here. Now these bars here may come out. So I'm just going to sit that in actually and see if it does. I'm just going to pull back slightly, pull that up. So what I've done there is I've just pulled up on this metal sling loop here, and that's just allowed it to go back flush. But the sling loop on the right hand side should look like that. The sling loop on this side should look like that. And then we can bring in the screw. Again, it's got the teeth near the end. The teeth are on this side, or the gaps for the teeth. Flip it over. Tighten that down. There we go. Bring in our handguard. Inadvertently adjust our hop. Position it so that we can get the pin in. Put the pin in. And there we go. We have disassembled for repairs and maintenance the JG MP5 SWAT or 069. Hope you've enjoyed that. I did not enjoy the anti-reversal latch and the wires jumping everywhere, but never mind. That's for another therapy session. So enjoy yourselves. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.